In working with over a dozen businesses who have done this, in my experience, you can cut at least $1,000 in expenses from every $100,000 in revenue the first time you do this. At least. Could be much more. That's not 1% of expenses. No, that's 1% of total revenue cut from expenses, which is a really outsized result. Leverage. Each of those dollars goes straight to the bottom line. Hey you, I'm Mark, husband of one, father of three, maker of puns, climber of trees, grower of businesses, pitcher of tents, occasional cutter of cheese, word nerd, and lover of families. Oh no. Oh no, not yet. No. Oh, here he comes. Where's my oar? Showed that Kraken who's boss. At least until like 2 p.m. this afternoon. I think I'll be due for another attack by then. Let's jump into it. Hey, welcome to all of you, bandits and chilies. This episode is called F.R.A.P.E, the secret coffee kick formula to make your business grow faster. So, challenge right at the top of this episode is a note taker. You should probably listen to this more than once, and your challenge right now is to schedule some time on your calendar to take notes on this and apply this framework within your business. This is one of the highest value activities that you can do within your business. If you spend 10 hours on this framework this month, you can easily add 5 or 6 figures to your business's revenue over the next 12 months. More if your business is larger. You can basically add as many figures as your business is currently doing. So if you have a 7-figure business in terms of revenue, you can add 6 figures really easily. And if you really hustle with this, you could probably add 7. So this is a thousands of dollars per hour activity. So take some time, schedule that time in, and actually do the stuff. Well, what stuff is that, Mark? I hear you ask. Well, I don't really like your tone, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So Joshua Latimer, the man, the myth, the legend, developed the F.R.A.P.E formula and then built Warplan AI on the basis of that formula to help home service business owners make more money from their numbers. I just don't like the way it sounds, which inspired me to turn it into F.R.A.P.E by adding the last 2 elements. Essentially what this framework allows you to do is to take an intentional look at each of these specific areas in your business and make money appear out of thin air. Don't believe me about money coming out of thin air? Stay tuned. We're going to go through this at length. So, what is F.R.A.P.E? Frequency, referrals, average ticket, price, production rate, expenses. So, frequency is how often customers buy from you on average. Referrals is how many referrals you get per jobs completed on average. Average ticket is the total price of each job sold on average, including if there's multiple services sold to one customer and provided on the same day. Price is how much you charge to do your thing. Production rate is how many dollars per hour of labor your business produces on average. And expenses, well, you're all too familiar with what expenses are. So, let's say that Larry has a cleaning business that in 2024 did $500,000 in revenue. He had $400,000 in total expenses, $140,000 of which was technician wages, and that left him with $100,000 of profit. Using the above, Larry seeks to apply the F.R.A.P.E formula to add a coffee kick to his business for 2025. He improves his follow-up with the expressed goal of getting 1 additional booking out of every 5 customers for the year than he would normally get. Then, he develops his referral program and embeds it into the customer experience at several different stages with the expressed goal of getting 1 additional referral from every 5 jobs completed. After that, Larry works on crafting service bundles so that he can book more work in per each job on average, aiming to increase his average ticket by 20%. Now, Larry updates his pricing to increase by 10%. If a client was going to pay $320 for a thing, they'll probably be happy to pay $352 for it. Not a huge difference to them, but a massive difference to Larry, since every dollar added without adding an expense is pure profit. So, side note, in the example of his numbers, Larry was operating on a 20% profit margin in 2024. So in 2025, with just this one change in isolation on price by upping it by 10%, he would take his top line revenue from $500,000 to $550,000. But he would take his bottom line revenue that really counts from $100,000 to $150,000, increasing his total profit by 50% with a 10% shift. That's a big deal. That's leverage, and we're going to cover that in a moment. You can do this for free today, and if you'd like to talk through some options of how to raise your pricing without losing clients or leads, book a call with me to discuss it. There'll be a link in the show notes. But having said that, we are going to cover that a little bit today, but that is one topic which I don't think we're going to fully fit into this episode because it needs like a series of its own. Anyway, so following after this, so far, Larry has addressed frequency, referrals, average ticket, and price. The next thing that Larry did after this was he had a nap. It had been a really big day and he was just feeling like F.R.A.P.P.E. But then his wife, Linda, brought him an iced coffee and he was just rejuvenated and ready to go to get back to work on F.R.A.P.E.E. He assessed his production rate. The team was averaging $100 per hour overall. Larry looked for ways to improve things. He noticed that they had 4 regular jobs in a township 30 minutes away that were not being scheduled together. He set about fixing that and developing an office system for more efficient scheduling of future jobs in general, aiming to keep the team working in a set zone that he mapped out and stuck on the office wall. If they were in Zone 1 on Monday, they couldn't do a Zone 4 job, even if they had the time. They would have to be booked in for that on a different day. This change ended up reducing expenses by 1% for the year with the saving of fuel, and also increased the productivity of the team by 10%, eliminating that downtime of travel. Lastly, Larry set to work on his expenses in earnest. He found a software solution which could consolidate 3 things he had previously been using. He eliminated marketing channels that didn't have a high enough ROI. He committed to purchasing as many of his supplies as possible, from office snacks all the way through to equipment and chemicals, in bulk when they were available at a discount. Including the above 1% that he recouped in fuel, Larry had reduced his expenses by a total of 4%. What a legend. Go Larry. Let's look at the results for his 2025. So he had that $500,000 baseline revenue that he was projecting based off what he did in 2024. He added 20% by increasing frequency, so that takes him to $600,000. He added 20% by getting referrals from 1 in 5 jobs, so that's $720,000 because these compound. He added 20% by increasing his average ticket, so now we're at $864,000. He added 10% from his price increase, so that's $950,400, and 10% by improving his production rate, taking us to $1,045,440. On top of that, he minused 4% of his expenses, which were previously at $400,000. So that's a saving of $16,000 that went straight from the top line, bypassing the middle of the profit and loss all the way to the bottom line. Now, to be fair to these numbers, we need to understand that all elements of F.R.A.P.E.E fall into one of 2 categories. The first 3 letters, F.R.A., frequency, referrals, average ticket, they are all expense incurring because they generate more work which needs to be done. You have to fulfill the work, so that is going to cost you labor, tools, chemicals, etc. The second category is free because the last 3, price, production, and expenses, are free. It costs you nothing to raise your price 10%. It costs you nothing to install efficiencies in your booking system or other similar things to increase productivity. And it costs you nothing to stop paying for a service that you can do without. Did you notice the key prerequisite to Larry being able to make these changes? It was hidden in plain sight. Larry knew his numbers. If you don't know your numbers as well as Larry knows his, then check out the 2025 budget workshop in the Family Oriented Business Growers group, which you can join via warplan.au. Also, in the description, there will be a link to Battle Plan, which is the free version of Warplan AI, the software that Joshua Latimer... Okay, calm down, you guys. Built around this very framework. It is built for this. Check it out. Now, it's really important that Larry knew his numbers so that he had a baseline from which to work to see what changes he could make. Now, that can be done historically. You can do that with past data. You can get the last 12 months of information from your business in these categories. We're going to talk through how to do that in a moment. And then you can get that baseline information. But then you need to be able to measure the results, not just plan. This brings us to today's quote. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. Famously by Archimedes. So, we're going to get really nerdy on this quote here for a second. A common lever, like picture a seesaw, has a load on one end, a fulcrum in the middle, and a force on the other end. The distance between the load and the fulcrum is called the load arm. The distance between the force applied to the lever and the fulcrum is called the effort arm. And with all of that and knowing the weight of the load, we can calculate the exact effort needed to lift it, the exact force that's required on the effort arm. So that teaches us two really important things. First, Archimedes knew that he would need to calculate those measurements to have success. He needed to know his numbers, just like Larry, just like you. Point one, know your numbers. Second, Archimedes was saying that he could move the world, him, personally, as an individual. His statement is 100% true, actually, though it sounds impossible. Cleverly, he outsourced the real problem to his audience by saying, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it. That's the real problem with him moving the world. However, if that was supplied, it would be possible for the force or the weight of one man to move the world. So point two, increase your leverage and your efforts can get outsized results. Also, you know how I'm a bit of a word nerd? Well, the word frappé is actually French for struck or punched, or in the context of the drink, figuratively shaken. So you can apply frappé as the force to your lever here and use it to shake up your business. It all just ties together so nicely. I found that very satisfying. Now, how can we do this practically? For each element of F.R.A.P.È, we're going to go through how to think about measuring it within your business, and then a couple of ideas of how to increase it within your business. Are you ready to jump right into this giant cup of cold coffee? Frequency. How to measure. This can be tricky depending on the type of business that you run. Even within the same business, you might have different services that require a totally different way of measuring them. For example, in our business, we have a general cleaning team and all of our general cleaning is done on a recurring schedule. We don't do one-off bookings. So all cleans are weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly. So that is one category of how we could possibly, incentivize people to book more frequent, like the weekly and fortnightly options as opposed to 4-weekly. But for our window, carpet, and tile cleaning, this is a totally different beast, which requires a completely different approach. With that side of things, we focus on aiming to book the next booking at the time of service and structuring a follow-up process which helps keep us top of mind and also incentivizes more frequent bookings. Just on this, check out the free 3-day low-hanging fruit challenge inside the Family Oriented Business Growers group, which you can join via warplan.au. So, how to measure depends on what you do. You may be able to run a report in your CRM for frequency of bookings, and it may even be broken down by service types depending on how your software is set up. If not, this may take a little finagling in the beginning to sift through some less specific reports, such as a list of all jobs completed in the last 12 months. Whatever you need to do to get the information the first time, just do it. Spend the time, find the baseline figures that you need. This is important. How else will you be able to measure your lever? Once you get that info, work out what needs to happen going forward to ensure that it's easier to collate in future. Perhaps switching CRMs, perhaps using Zapier to collate different job types onto different spreadsheets, perhaps adding this into an admin end-of-day task, especially if that's just like copying and pasting information that's already included in their end-of-day report. Now, how to improve this? As I said, it does depend on what you're doing. Even the services that I just listed of windows, carpets, and tiles, those things and many others that are functionally quite similar to them will have different service intervals by default. The general concept, though, would be to incentivize, stay top of mind, aim to book in advance, and shoot for defaults that align with increasing your frequency. So, for example, if the customer is on the fence about whether or not to book something a particular way, let's use the general cleaning example for this. If they're thinking, I don't know if I want to go a weekly or a fortnightly clean to start off with, say, well, look, why don't we just book it weekly and see how that goes? You can always change your mind. The reverse could be true. They could book it fortnightly and then bump to weekly, but you want to book in what you can book in. If you aim to make it a more frequent booking right off the bat, then the chance of them changing it is lower once it's set in motion. All right, on to referrals. So how to measure referrals. Measuring referrals is really going to be baked into how we improve it. But essentially, you want to have an intake system to record when a job specifically is a referral. So you should be asking every single client how they heard about you. So if you've done that, then you'll at least have a record of how many referrals you got last year compared to the total number of jobs that you did. So that can work as a baseline number. Then you want to work that out as a percentage or as a 1 in however many, whichever makes more sense in your brain. They're essentially the same thing, but sometimes thinking, 1 in 5 as opposed to 20% might work better for some people. Now, how to improve this? Well, with measuring, you'll need to attribute each referral to their referrer. You should structure a referral rewards program. An example of a really simple yet effective referral program called Simple Simon Says Referrals can be found in the low-hanging fruit challenge mentioned earlier. So, check out warplan.au. That program covers all of the needed points for a referral program whilst keeping it as simple as possible to deploy and manage, all totally for free. All right, on to average ticket. How are we going to measure that? Your CRM should be able to spit this number right at you, but the equation that you're looking for is the total revenue divided by the total number of jobs. As with frequency, it may make sense to segment this by job types, as we do, for example, with general cleaning compared to our other services. For our reoccurring general cleaning, the way that we would measure this over the entire year would be different to the other services, as we would take the total value of that client's general cleaning bookings for the whole year, not on a per booking basis. This optimizes for more insightful information as it reveals how much you're likely to get out of each new client of that type, factoring in churn. It doesn't make sense to optimize to look at how much the average job costs when each job that client had was the same price for the whole year. So that equation would instead be the total number of revenue for that service divided by the total number of clients serviced instead of by the total number of jobs serviced. So how would you improve your average ticket? Bundling services together, incentivizing those bundles, maybe offering a discount of X number of dollars or X number of percent when you book 2 or more services together. Selling guarantees on top of the service, something additional that they can buy that ensures something about the longevity of that service or whatever it may be, depending on what you're doing. Selling products that align with your service or vice versa, services that align with your products. This is something that a lot of people miss, especially in service businesses. It's not super common for home family sort of service businesses to think of selling products as well. Actually, it's relatively easy to even white label those products and put your own branding and everything on that as well. And what you can then have is you have this service that you perform. You might have a product that acts as a sample or gift that you can leave behind for perhaps maintenance in between their booked services, something that they can manage themselves, as well as products that they can actually buy and things that solve a specific need that's likely to come up as part of their own sort of maintenance program with whatever it is, right? So that can be a really good one. Creating higher ticket options. So people can't say yes to options that they don't know that they have. So if you present one of the options in your quotes that is now $3,000 more than the highest priced offer was previously, well, now there's a chance for someone to say yes to that thing. You need to craft that offer, you need to put some value into it, you need to think about what would need to be true for someone to see this new higher offer as better value. But that thought exercise is really helpful because it challenges you to think about the service that you're offering now in a different way and to think about what more you could do, what extra value you could bring into that service to increase the total job size. Hey, just before I jump into the last 3 elements of F.R.A.P.E, price, production, and expenses, I've got a question for you. If I said that you could only listen to the rest of this episode if you shared it with someone else, gave it a review, or posted about it on Facebook, would you quit listening here or would you take me up on one of the above so that you could keep listening? If you wouldn't, then, fair enough, go listen to some Taylor Swift, you do you. But if you would, please consider sharing, reviewing, or posting about this episode. I've put effort into making this, especially for your eardrums. Your left one is my favorite. And it would be a nice way for you to pay that forward by inflicting that creepy little line on the next person. Go on, you want to. Now, on to price. How to measure. This is really simple to measure because it's like, how much do you charge for the things that you do? So that part's really easy. However, there's 2 things that I would like to note here. First, you should have a price book or pricing system that is specific enough that other people could be trained to quote your jobs. If it's not replicatable, then you're just building a bottleneck in your business. The system of your pricing already exists. It just might only exist in your brain and you need to document it. If you can't do that, you really can't scale because as additional jobs are coming through, you're always going to be at that point of needing to provide the quote, needing to provide the price, needing to answer questions about price. It's all going to flow directly through you and clog up your bandwidth if that system is not in place. Point number 2, you should ensure that you understand your costs, especially costs of goods sold, COGS, in relation to your pricing, and you should know your gross margin and your net margin by service type. This is easy to figure out broadly. Simply run a profit and loss report in QuickBooks, Xero, or whatever you're using for your accounting software. However, to get specific on this will take more time. Spend the time and break down the costs by service. For example, if you have a stone cleaning service and a stone sealing service, Those are two very different things, which should have very different costs and margins. The cleaning will take a lot longer, involve more equipment, but the chemicals are cheaper. Whereas the sealing is going to be super fast by comparison, but the sealer is way more costly. So you need to ensure that both of those services are being priced correctly, because if they're not, and you don't know your numbers well, one could easily piggyback off the success of the other long term, whilst never actually making you any money, or it could even be leeching money, costing you money to perform that service each time that you do it. All right, so now how to improve your pricing. There are a ton of things to note about pricing increases. Firstly, you are probably not charging enough right now, and you should charge more. Josh came up with the F.R.A.P.P.E concept from private equity and how they operate. So if private equity bought your company today, they would raise your prices tomorrow because they know that there is money being left on the table. So let's say that you don't raise your prices and then you sell your company in a year from now. That's 1 year's worth of that increase that should have been yours because it was going to happen anyway. Also, you need to price in your future costs if you want to grow. The 3 steps down the road version of your business has more expenses than your current business. And you can get there a lot faster and with a lot less friction by understanding that now. Maybe at that point you're going to need an extra work van. Maybe you need an office space and you have to think about rent and an admin. Maybe you need an extra $10,000 worth of insurance per year because of the kinds of jobs that you're going to be taking on at that point. People tend to get very caught in their own head over pricing, and there's way too much to discuss on this topic, so I think it is going to have to be for a different episode. But one quick tip is that with raising your prices on your existing customers, if you have apprehension about that and you're feeling stuck and you know the dread and the fear and your fingers are rattling on the keyboard as you're trying to write out the email, firstly, think about how to structure that email in as positive a way as possible. Try and drop more than that information at once. Put something else in that email to act as a buffer and frame it as positively as you can. Book a call and we can have a chat about that if you want. Again, that's a whole thing. But the other thing is you don't need to do it all at once. You can segment your list. You could start with 20 to 100 clients. And then after you've raised the prices on that little group, when they don't all just spit venom on you and run for the hills, you'll have increased your confidence for the next segment that you raise the price for. All right, so on to production rate. How to measure. The equation is the total revenue produced divided by the total number of hours worked. And just to be clear, those are hours of production, not hours of like admin, for example. So the total number of hours worked by technicians. I would count this to include all of the hours that they work, including those spent driving between jobs or doing start of day and end of day activities. Those things cost you money, so you should count them into the production rate. Now, how to improve the production rate? You can look for efficiencies, as with the example of Larry in scheduling. You can look for efficiencies in the process, how the work itself is actually getting done. Maybe there's some equipment that you could invest in that would aid in the efficiency of that process. You can also incentivize production by having performance-based incentives for your team for hitting certain targets. So if you do this, you should keep the performance-based incentive, key performance indicators, the PBI KPIs, up to date daily with a tally for each employee to let them know how much they have earned in bonuses. If it's updated only like once a week, they're going to feel vastly different about that system on Monday than they do by Thursday. So having that daily in front of them where they can see the direct results from the direct actions that they've taken will get the best results if you're running a performance-based incentive system. Okay, onto expenses. How to measure. So fairly simple, at least initially. You run your profit and loss report through your accounting software. You look at the numbers. Something that I didn't mention earlier, as I just took this for granted, was that you need to have your books up to date and reconciled at least once per week. If that isn't something that you think you can do, and look, it'll probably, initially, if it's like way out of date, it's going to take a while. But then once you get into it, it does not take that long to do that. But if you think that that's not something that you can do, look into hiring a bookkeeper or a bookkeeping service. Most software is pretty good at recognizing the patterns of the transactions and coding them correctly. So it isn't out of the league of something that you could be doing on your own, even if you think that it is. It might make you uncomfortable, but that's just an area that you can grow into and learn. I believe in you. You can definitely do it. But if you are looking for a new software or bank, I recommend checking out Thriday, THRIDAY, as they are both of those things all in one place. Now, how to improve. Given that you have all of your books up to date and transactions properly coded, when you go through your expenses in your accounting software, you can look at each item in your profit and loss in greater and greater detail until you find something that looks like it could be cut. So, for example, perhaps you notice that you spend $2,000 per year on software, and so you click on that line item, and there amongst the recurring transactions, you find 2 subscriptions that you rarely use or no longer need. I really recommend reading Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. One thing that he talks about is Parkinson's Law, which is that work expands to fill the available time. So, if you have that project that needs to be completed next month, it will be. And if you have that project that needs to be completed tomorrow, because your wife has kindly reminded you that that thing that she told you about is actually this weekend and not some nebulous time in the future as you previously thought, then you get it done. That also happens. Likewise, with money. If you can run your business on $10,000 worth of expenses per month, then you can run it on 1% less, $9,900 per month. If you had to, you would find a way. Another trick that he mentions in this book is calling the bank and telling them that your credit card has been stolen. By whom? By me, of course. I think I stole it. They issue you a new card to replace the lost or stolen card, and guess what? All of your automatic transactions associated with that old card are going to fail. You will have to manually update the payment information. This is really powerful because it plays into the human psychology. It's so much easier to let expenses remain in place than it is to reinstate those expenses. So it flips the incentives and causes you to be more ruthless in what you cut. Can you ditch some software? Can you simplify your processes? Could you switch suppliers? Print out all of your transactions for the past year. Yes, print them out. Then take a highlighter and mark everything that could even possibly vaguely, just maybe a little bit, be worthy of consideration. Even if you can't do without that thing, maybe you can look into seeing if there's a way that you could find a less costly alternative for that thing. And this is a really good annual practice because the speed at which technology is developing right now, especially taking software as an example, what you're paying $500 a year for right now, there's likely going to be a $200 a year option for next year, or maybe even something that's free or built into another program that you can consolidate a few things in one too. So it's good to review that and look at what options are available today to save on those costs today. In working with over a dozen businesses who have done this, in my experience, you can cut at least $1,000 in expenses from every $100,000 in revenue the first time you do this. At least. Could be much more. That's not 1% of expenses. No, that's 1% of total revenue cut from expenses, which is a really outsized result. Leverage. Each of those dollars goes straight to the bottom line. So let's recap. Larry added 20% by means of frequency, 20% by referrals, 20% to his average ticket, 10% to price, 10% by production rate, and he subtracted 4% off his expenses, more than doubling his business from 2024's revenue of $500,000 to $1,045,440 for 2025. That's an increase of over 117%. And he could have raised his prices by more than 10%. I mean, come on, Larry, what were you thinking? The first 3 letters of F.R.A.P.P.E are expense incurring because they require the additional work created to be fulfilled. The last 3 letters are free or at least not inherently expense incurring, as there are ways to increase price and production rate whilst lowering expenses without spending money. Your challenge from this episode is to take the time right now to schedule a large block of time later to take on this thousands of dollars per hour task. This content is valuable to your business, but only if you implement it. Nothing happens if nothing happens. Nothing is going to change with this if you just enjoy the dopamine from hearing the sultry tones of my voice whispering into my favorite ear for the last 45 minutes. But if you don't convert any of this potential leverage of the force that is the F.R.A.P.E strike, remember, because in French, F.R.A.P.E is like a slap-a, yeah? See what I did there? It's not like a Slurpee, though it kind of is. This is confusing. Unfortunately for you, though, that was not today's lame dad joke. No, instead, you have to hear about the man who died of a coffee overdose. His wife requested that he be buried in the earth without a box because she wanted him to be decoffinated. Hey, if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to leave a 5-star iTunes review, share it on your socials, or send it specifically to a family-oriented business grower that you know out there in the wild. Lastly, I'm working on a 6-week workshop following the F.R.A.P.E.É Framework. It will be 1 call per week for 6 weeks, focusing one at a time on each element with specific action steps to take within the next week ahead of that following call. It will be quite hand-holdy and therefore easy and fun done in a group context. It's going to be a paid thing and the cost will be $1,497. However, there is also going to be a free option. That's right, free. Not some weird acronym meaning frequency, referrals, eggs, and expenses or something. No. Actually free meaning at no cost. So if you like free things that make you money, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's not your thing. Plenty of people like expensive hobbies that cost them money. But if in fact that sounds like you, someone who likes free things that make them money, then head on over to warplan.au, join the Family Oriented Business Growers group, and stay tuned for updates on how to join that 6-week workshop on the F.R.A.P.E.É Framework for free. That's it. Have an awesome day. Make someone else's day awesome. I love you just the appropriate amount. Like take whatever's weird, then take a healthy step backwards from that line. That's how much. If it's weird, it's because you're making it weird. All right, catch ya. Bye. Are you picking up what I'm laying down? Are you sniffing what I'm stepping in? If you're looking for a really valuable community centered around building your business, being really intentional with your spouse and kids, and if you think you can tolerate my terrible dad jokes, then join Family-Oriented Business Growers. It's awesome. There's self-paced challenges designed to help you solve key pain points within your business in short, intentional sprints. There's awesome people in there doing awesome things who have experience with stuff that can help you, having stood where you stand. You'll benefit from what's in there, we'll benefit from having you in there, you legend you, and best of all, it's totally free and also free of toxic shenanigans because we don't tolerate none of that. The mission of the group is to help 250 family-oriented home service business owners reclaim 5 hours per week for what matters most whilst growing their business this year. So jump in there and get amongst it. Join via warplan.au, that's warplan.au. Oh no. He's early. Warplan.au. Catch you in there. Ah!